The massive circular chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before Ambassador Rachel Thompson like a coliseum of judgment. 47 different species filled the tiered seats, their various forms creating a bizarre menagerie of endless creativity. Some floated in containment fields filled with methane. Others clicked and chittered through mechanical translators. A few simply pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that somehow conveyed meaning across the vast distances between stars. Rachel had been sitting in the same uncomfortable chair for 3 hours, waiting for her turn to speak. The polished metal surface beneath her hands had grown warm from her grip, and she could feel the familiar ache building between her shoulder blades. 30 years of diplomatic missions had taught her patience, but today, that patience felt as thin as the artificial atmosphere surrounding them. High Counselor Malik dominated the central podium with his imposing presence. His species, the Nexari, stood nearly 8 feet tall when fully extended, their four-stalked eyes capable of independent movement. Those eyes now focused on Rachel with what she had learned to recognize as barely concealed amusement. The translator, mounted on his thorax, buzzed to life with mechanical precision. The petition from the Terran delegation regarding mining rights in the Kepler 442 system has been reviewed by the appropriate subcommittees, Malik announced, his natural clicking sounds converted into flat, emotionless words. The Council finds insufficient evidence of human maturity to warrant expanded territorial privileges. Rachel felt her jaw clench involuntarily. This was the 15th rejection this year. The 15th time she had presented carefully prepared arguments, detailed environmental impact studies, and proposed profit-sharing agreements, only to be dismissed like a child asking for extra dessert. The Kepler 442 system contained rare Earth's metals that Earth's growing population desperately needed. Their colonies were rationing basic supplies, while alien civilizations hoarded resources they barely used. Perhaps in another century, Malik continued, his 4 eyes now focusing on different sections of the chamber, when humanity has demonstrated the wisdom and restraint necessary for responsible expansion among the stars. The chamber erupted in a symphony of agreement. The insectoid Kurathi clicked their approval through chitinous mandibles. The crystalline Etherians chimed in harmonic resonance. Even the gas-based Vorthons shifted their cloudy forms in patterns Rachel had learned indicated satisfaction. 47 species, all nodding along to the same tired refrain. Humans were too young, too volatile, too unpredictable to be trusted with the same rights granted to other civilizations. Rachel stood slowly, her diplomatic training warring with the frustration burning in her chest. The chamber fell silent as she activated her own translator. The small device clipped to her collar, humming softly as it prepared to broadcast her words to dozens of different sensory systems. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice steady, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Humanity has abided by every treaty, honored every trade agreement, and respected every territorial boundary established by this council for 3 decades. Our colonies operate under your environmental guidelines. Our ships follow your shipping lanes. Our miners work within your quotas. We have been model citizens of this galactic community." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that ranged from utterly alien to vaguely familiar. Some species had evolved from ocean dwellers, their smooth skin glistening under the artificial lights. Others bore the angular features of desert world survivors, their eyes protected by multiple membranes. A few looked disturbingly human, the result of parallel evolution on distant worlds. Yet every request for expansion is denied, Rachel continued. Every petition for resource access is rejected. Every proposal for partnership is dismissed. We are told we lack wisdom, but wisdom comes from experience. We are told we lack restraint, but restraint without opportunity is merely stagnation. Hi. Counselor Malik's translator crackled with what sounded like laughter. The young species speaks of stagnation, while their homeworld spawns new colonies like an infection. We have observed human expansion patterns. You consume resources at unprecedented rates. You terraform worlds to suit your needs, rather than adapting to existing conditions. You wage wars among yourselves over territorial disputes that could be resolved through proper mediation. Wars that ended decades ago, Rachel replied sharply. Conflicts resolved through the same diplomatic processes we attempt to use here, only to find our efforts dismissed as inadequate. The Vorthan representative, a swirling mass of purple gas contained within a transparent sphere, pulsed with rapid color changes. Rachel's translator struggled to convert the meaning. Human emotion clouds judgment. Passion interferes with logic. Young species requires guidance until maturity achieved. Rachel felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had heard variations of this speech countless times, but today the words carried a different weight. Behind her diplomatic smile, she remembered the encrypted message she had received from Earth Command before this session. Admiral James. Mitchell's face had been grim as he delivered his instructions. Get us those mining rights, Rachel. Our outer colonies are running out of options. The Fleet Admiralty is tired of asking permission for things we could simply take. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Admiral Mitchell was not a man given to empty threats. His service record included the pacification of the Mars Rebellion and the successful defense of the Europa mining stations against pirate raids. When he spoke of taking rather than asking, he meant exactly what he said. Around the chamber, the various species continued their debates about human inadequacy. They spoke as if Rachel were not present, discussing humanity's flaws with the casual dismissiveness of adults critiquing a child's artwork. The Karathi delegates suggested additional waiting periods. The Etherian representative proposed mandatory cultural sensitivity training. The Nexari High Counselor nodded approvingly at each suggestion, his 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. None of them seemed to recognize the shift occurring in Rachel's expression. Her diplomatic smile remained perfectly in place, but something fundamental had changed behind her eyes. For 30 years, humanity had played by their rules, accepted their judgments, and swallowed their condescension in the hopes of earning respect through patience and cooperation. That patience was becoming a finite resource. The emergency alert had reached Admiral Lisa Rodriguez while she was reviewing supply reports in her quarters aboard the UES Prometheus. The message was brief but devastating. Haven Colony was under attack by an alien enforcement fleet. By the time she reached the bridge and ordered the emergency jump to FTL, 6 hours had already passed since the first distress signal. Haven Colony had been one of humanity's success stories. Located in the Outer Rim territories, the settlement had started with just 300 volunteers willing to spend their lives turning a barren rock into something livable. That was 60 years ago. 3 generations of families had poured their hearts into making Haven Colony a true home, complete with schools, parks, and even a small university where children learned about both human history and their place among the stars. The colonists had followed every rule. They had filed the proper territorial claims with the Galactic Council. They had submitted environmental impact studies. They had even invited alien observers to verify their terraforming methods were within established guidelines. For 60 years, Haven Colony had been a shining example of human cooperation with galactic law. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge as her ship dropped out of hyperspace, her hands gripping the command rail until her knuckles turned white. The tactical display immediately filled with red warning symbols. 12 alien vessels hung in orbit around Haven Colony like vultures, circling prey. The ships belonged to the Karathi, an insectoid species known for their rigid interpretation of galactic law and their belief that younger species needed constant supervision. Status report, Rodriguez ordered, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis looked up from her sensor station, her face pale. Admiral, we're detecting massive atmospheric disturbances on the colony's surface. The alien fleet appears to be using plasma bombardment. weapons. They're systematically destroying all human structures. Rodriguez felt her heart sink as she watched the display. Bright flashes of light marked each strike as another piece of human civilization disappeared forever. The school where children had learned to read, the medical center where 3 generations of babies had been born, the memorial park where colonists had honored friends and family who died building their new world. Any sign of survivors? She asked quietly. Unknown, ma'am. The atmospheric interference is blocking our sensors. But based on the bombardment pattern, Davis trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of ship systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Every officer present understood what they were witnessing. This was not a military engagement between armed forces. This was the systematic destruction of a peaceful civilian population whose only crime was trying to build a better life on a distant world. The communications officer suddenly straightened at his station. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Korathi flagship. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our business in what they claim is restricted space. Rodriguez looked at the tactical display again. The alien ships had arranged themselves in a defensive formation around the planet, their weapons still firing at targets on the surface. Occasionally, she could see escape pods launching from the colony, tiny specks of hope fleeing toward the outer system. At least some people had survived the initial attack. Put them through, she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular face of a Korathi commander. The alien's compound eyes glittered with cold efficiency as it spoke through its mechanical translator. Human vessel, you are trespassing in a restricted enforcement zone. The Galactic Council has authorized the removal of unauthorized settlements from this system. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences of interfering with legal enforcement actions. Admiral. Rodriguez stared at the alien commander for a long moment. Behind the creature's head, she could see other Korathi officers going about their duties with mechanical precision. To them, this was just another day at work. They were following orders, enforcing regulations, maintaining the established order of galactic civilization. Legal enforcement actions, Rodriguez repeated slowly. Is that what you call burning down schools and hospitals? The Korathi commander's expression did not change. The illegal settlement was given adequate warning to evacuate. Those who chose to remain accepted the consequences of their defiance. This enforcement action is concluded. You will depart now. Rodriguez closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the reports she had read about Haven Colony. The children who had been born there had never seen Earth. To them, Haven was not just a colony but their entire world. The adults had spent decades carefully building a sustainable society that could thrive in harmony with the planet's natural systems. They had created art, music, and literature inspired by their unique experience as humans living among the stars. All of that was gone now, reduced to smoking craters by aliens who saw human dreams as nothing more than paperwork violations. Communications, Rodriguez said quietly, signaled the fleet. All ships to battle stations. Weapons hot. Her communications officer looked up with concern. Ma'am, engaging the Korathi fleet could be considered an act of war against the Galactic Council. The diplomatic consequences. Rodriguez turned to face her officer, and he fell silent at the expression in her eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 30 years of military service and a lifetime of watching humanity bow to alien authority. The Council just stood by while 12,000 innocent people lost everything they ever worked for. Diplomatic consequences are no longer my primary concern. The bridge crew exchanged glances as they realized the significance of the moment. For 3 decades, humanity had accepted every slight, every restriction, every condescending lecture from the galactic community. They had played by the rules, hoping that patience and cooperation would eventually earn them respect and equal treatment. That patience had just run out. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within 72 hours of the Haven Colony incident. Ambassador Rachel Thompson had requested the session herself, hoping that once the full council saw the evidence of what had happened, they would understand the magnitude of the tragedy and take steps to prevent future incidents. She had been wrong. Rachel stood in the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by the same 47 species that had rejected humanity's requests for decades. The holographic projectors behind her displayed a continuous loop of images from Haven Colony's final hours. Smoking ruins where the elementary school had stood, melted playgrounds where children had laughed just days before, the twisted remains of the community center where families had gathered for celebrations and meetings. The images were not sanitized reports or clinical data. They were raw footage from the colony's security cameras, transmitted in the final moments, before the plasma bombardment destroyed the communication arrays. The footage showed families running toward evacuation shuttles, parents carrying children who were too young to understand why their world was ending, elderly colonists who had spent their entire adult lives building Haven into a home. High Counselor Malik observed the display with the same detached interest he might show for a weather report. His 4 independent eyes moved in different directions, taking in the destruction with mechanical precision. When he spoke, his translator converted his clicking sounds into words that carried no emotion whatsoever. The enforcement action against the illegal settlement designated Haven Colony has been reviewed by the appropriate council committees, he announced. The Karathi enforcement fleet acted within established parameters for territorial violations. While the council acknowledges the displacement of human population was regrettable, the action was necessary to maintain the integrity of galactic territorial law. Rachel felt her breath catch in her throat. She had expected acknowledgement of the tragedy. She had hoped for condolences, perhaps even an investigation into whether the response had been proportionate to the supposed violation. Instead, she was hearing the same bureaucratic language that reduced human suffering to administrative details. The territorial claim filed by the human colony was incomplete, according to Section 12 of the Galactic Settlement Accords, continued another delegate, this one from the crystalline Etherian species. Their translucent form pulsed with satisfied light patterns as they spoke. The humans failed to obtain proper environmental clearances from 3 separate council subcommittees. The settlement was therefore illegal from its inception. Rachel's hands trembled as she gripped her datapad. The environmental clearances the Etherian referred to had been requested 60 years ago. The human colonists had been told they would receive a response within a standard galactic year. They were still waiting for that response when the Karath fleet arrived to destroy their world, their purple forms swirling with agitation. Human expansion patterns continue to demonstrate lack of proper oversight. Young species require guidance to prevent ecological disasters and territorial conflicts. The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement, dozens of different species, representing thousands of worlds and billions of lives, all nodding along to the same narrative. Humans were reckless. Humans were dangerous. Humans needed to be controlled for their own good and the safety of the galaxy. Rachel looked up at the observer gallery, where a small group of human diplomats and journalists watched the proceedings. Their faces showed the same mixture of shock and rage that she felt building in her own chest. Among them sat Marcus Webb, a journalist who had covered galactic politics for 2 decades. His usual professional composure had cracked, and she could see tears running down his face as he watched the alien delegates dismiss human suffering with casual indifference. The human delegation requested this emergency session, High Counselor, Malik said, finally acknowledging Rachel's presence. We will hear their statement, though the matter has already been thoroughly reviewed and determined to be resolved according to established law. Rachel stepped forward, her diplomatic training warring with emotions she had never experienced in 30 years of service. She had prepared a speech about justice, about the need for proportional responses. about the value of human life, and the importance of protecting civilian populations. All of those words seemed meaningless now, as she stared into the alien faces surrounding her. 12,000 people, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 12,000 human beings who spent their entire lives building something beautiful on a distant world. Teachers who educated 3 generations of children. Doctors who brought new life into the universe. Artists who created music and poetry inspired by alien skies. She gestured toward the holographic display, where the images continued to cycle through scenes of destruction. These were not soldiers or criminals. They were families. They were dreamers who believed that humanity could find a place among the stars without violence or conquest. They followed your laws, respected your boundaries, and trusted your justice. The chamber remained silent except for the ambient sounds of life support systems and translator devices. Rachel could see boredom in some faces, impatience in others. A few delegates had already begun reviewing other matters on their personal displays, treating her words as an inconvenient interruption to more important business. "And you call their deaths an inconvenience," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "You reduced the destruction of everything they built to a minor administrative correction. You dismissed the screams of children as the necessary consequence of incomplete paperwork." High Counselor Malik's translator buzzed with what sounded like irritation. "The human delegate appears to be allowing emotion to cloud rational judgment. The enforcement action was regrettable, but necessary. The Council suggests that humanity focus on preventing future violations, rather than dwelling on past corrections." Rachel closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In that moment of darkness, she saw not the political chamber around her, but the faces of Haven Colony's children. She remembered visiting the colony 5 years earlier as part of a diplomatic tour. The children had performed a play about first contact, complete with costumes representing different alien species. They had portrayed the galaxy as a place of wonder and friendship, where different forms of life could learn from each other and build something greater than any single species could achieve alone. Those children were dead now, killed by the very species they had celebrated in their innocent performance. When Rachel opened her eyes, something fundamental had shifted in her expression. The diplomatic mask she had worn for 3 decades was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. She looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates with new eyes, seeing them not as representatives of advanced civilizations, but as the architects of institutionalized cruelty. "We understand," she said quietly, her words carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity. "We understand perfectly now." The delegates continued their discussions, missing the significance of her statement. But in the observer gallery, the human witnesses recognized the change immediately. They had just watched the death of humanity's faith in galactic civilization and the birth of something that would reshape the galaxy forever. The change began quietly in the outer colonies, far from the watchful eyes of Galactic Council observers. Within days of Ambassador Rachel Thompson's final statement, encrypted messages flashed between human settlements across dozens of star systems. The content was simple, but revolutionary. Humanity was done asking for permission. Dr. Emily Carson had been running a peaceful research station on Proxima Minor when the orders arrived. Her team of scientists had spent years studying alien plant life, hoping to develop new medicines that could benefit all species in the galaxy. The research station employed 43 people and had never produced anything more dangerous than mild fertilizer. That changed overnight. Emily stood in her laboratory, watching as military engineers dismantled her delicate botanical equipment and replaced it with industrial fabrication units. The same machines that had been growing alien flowers yesterday were now producing ammunition and weapon components. Her research assistants had been reassigned to weapons development, their knowledge of alien biology repurposed for entirely different applications. "This feels wrong," said Dr. Michael Stevens, her longtime research partner. He held a piece of equipment that had once analyzed plant genetics but now measured explosive yields. We became scientists to help people, not to build weapons. Emily nodded, but her expression remained determined. The galaxy made its choice when it decided our children didn't matter. Now we make ours. Similar transformations were occurring throughout human space. The mining colony on Titan 7 had been producing rare metals for alien manufacturers. Within a week, those same metals were being forged into armor plating for human warships. The agricultural world of New Kansas had been growing food to trade with alien species. Now their hydroponic facilities were producing emergency rations for human military forces. Most shocking of all was the speed with which humanity's military capabilities expanded. For 30 years, humans had maintained a small defensive fleet, carefully sized to meet Galactic Council guidelines for young species. Those guidelines had limited human ships to basic patrol craft and transport vessels. Nothing that could threaten established galactic powers. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as construction crews worked around the clock to refit civilian vessels with military hardware. The cargo ship Peaceful Trader had been renamed the UES Retribution and now bristled with plasma cannons. The passenger liner Star Dreams was being converted into a troop transport capable of carrying 2,000 soldiers. "Admiral," reported Captain James Parker, her tactical officer, "the Kepler system defense grid is complete. We have sensor nets monitoring all approach vectors and automated weapons platforms at every major jump point." Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. The Kepler system had been one of the disputed territories that the Galactic Council had forbidden humans to settle. Now it served as humanity's forward military base, complete with shipyards, training facilities, and enough firepower to stop any alien fleet that dared to challenge human expansion. The aliens learned about humanity's transformation the hard way. The Karathi Enforcement Fleet had been dispatched to investigate reports of unauthorized human military activity in the Kepler system. 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen escort vessels dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find a handful of nervous human colonists who could be easily intimidated into compliance. Instead, they found Admiral Rodriguez waiting for them with 4 human warships arranged in perfect battle formation. The engagement was brief and utterly one-sided. Humanity had spent 3 decades studying alien military technology while pretending to be peaceful traders and diplomats. They knew the weaknesses of every ship design, the limitations of every weapon system, and the tactical preferences of every alien species. When the battle began, the humans moved with precision that shocked their enemies. The Karathi fleet lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the plasma fire cleared, there was nothing left but expanding clouds of debris and unanswered distress signals. News of the battle reached the Galactic Council within hours, sending shockwaves through every alien government. For the first time in centuries, a young species had not only defied Council authority, but had proven capable of backing up their defiance with overwhelming force. Emergency sessions were called. Defense fleets were mobilized. Trade agreements were suspended. But nothing could change the fundamental reality that had emerged from the smoking ruins of the Karathi fleet. Humanity was no longer asking for permission. Ambassador Rachel Thompson stood before the Galactic Council one final time, but her role had fundamentally changed. She was no longer a petitioner seeking favor from superior powers. She was a representative of an independent civilization, delivering an ultimatum to former masters. The holographic displays behind her showed real-time data from across human space. Fleets moving to secure disputed territories. Colonies declaring independence from council oversight. Trade routes being redirected to serve human interests exclusively. Most ominously, alien vessels being turned away from human space with a simple message: "You are not welcome here." The Terran Federation hereby withdraws from all Galactic Council agreements, Rachel announced, her voice carrying none of the diplomatic deference that had characterized her previous appearances. "Our trade compacts are void. Our territorial accords are cancelled. Our diplomatic protocols are terminated." High Counselor Malak's eyes focused on her with alarm. "The Council cannot permit such unilateral action. The economic consequences alone will be your problem to solve," Rachel interrupted. "For 30 years, you treated us like children who needed guidance and supervision. You dismissed our achievements, ignored our contributions, and responded to our losses with indifference. Children eventually grow up, Counselor, and when they do, they stop asking their parents for permission to live their own lives." The chamber erupted in protest from dozens of alien delegates, but Rachel continued speaking over their objections. "Any alien vessel found in human-claimed space will be treated as hostile. Any attempt to interfere with human expansion will be met with appropriate force. Any attack on human civilians will result in retaliation against military targets." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had once filled her with hope for interspecies cooperation. Now she saw only the expressions of beings who had created their own nightmare through arrogance and casual cruelty. "The age of human patience is over," she concluded. "Welcome to the age of human independence." As Rachel left the chamber for the last time, the galaxy began to understand that everything had changed. The humans were no longer the grateful junior partners seeking acceptance. They had become something far more dangerous, a species with nothing left to lose, and the power to reshape the galaxy according to their own vision of justice. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called after months of desperate attempts to contact human leadership. Representatives from 47 species filled the familiar circular chamber, but the space felt hollow and diminished. The human delegation seats remained empty, their polished surfaces reflecting the overhead lights like dark mirrors. High Counselor Malak stood at the central podium, his 4 eyes moving nervously as he surveyed the assembled delegates. Gone was the casual arrogance he had displayed during decades of dismissing human petitions. In its place was something that looked disturbingly like fear. "The situation has become critical," he began, his translator converting his clicking sounds into words that carried none of his former confidence. "Human expansion has claimed 47 star systems that were previously under Council jurisdiction. Their military fleets have established what they call exclusion zones around resource-rich worlds that have been considered common galactic property for over 3 centuries. The Etherean delegate, her crystalline form flickering with anxious light patterns, spoke up from her section of the chamber. "Our merchant vessels have been turned away from all human territories. They refuse to acknowledge our trading licenses or our historical navigation rights. 3 of our cargo ships were escorted out of the Vega system by human warships last week." Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber as other delegates shared similar experiences. The gas-based Vorthan representatives swirled with agitated, purple clouds as they described being denied access to nebula formations they had harvested for energy for millennia. The insectoid Karathi, once so confident in their enforcement capabilities, clicked nervously about human fleets that appeared without warning and vanished just as quickly. "They have become completely isolationist," added the reptilian Zalthon delegate, his scaled features showing unusual emotion. "Worse than isolationist. They have become efficiently isolationist. Every human response is calculated, precise, and final. There is no negotiation, no discussion, no appeal process." High Counselor Malak activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic territories. Red zones marked human-controlled space, expanding outward from Earth like a growing infection. What had once been scattered human colonies were now connected by secure shipping lanes protected by military patrols. Entire sectors that had been open to all species were now marked with warning beacons broadcasting the same message in every known language. "This system is under Terran Federation control. Unauthorized vessels will be escorted out or destroyed. The economic impact has been severe, reported the Nexari trade representative, her multiple arms gesturing at data streams. That showed declining profits across multiple industries. Human colonies were our largest consumers of manufactured goods. Their sudden withdrawal from all trade agreements has caused market instability across 17 sectors. The chamber filled with the sounds of distress as delegates realized the full scope of their predicament. For 3 decades, they had treated humanity as a junior partner whose contributions were useful but not essential. Now they were discovering just how wrong they had been. Dr. Elena Bosques, the Council's chief economist, had spent the past 6 months analyzing the human withdrawal. Her species, the amphibious Aquans, were known for their analytical abilities and emotional detachment. But even she seemed shaken as she presented her findings. The humans were not just consumers, she reported, her gills fluttering with agitation. They were innovators. 60% of the new technologies introduced to galactic markets in the past decade originated from human research stations. Their agricultural techniques were feeding colonies across 12 different species. Their medical research was advancing treatments for diseases that affect beings they had never even met. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The galaxy had not just lost trading partners. They had lost the species that had been quietly driving innovation and progress, while being dismissed as too young and inexperienced to matter. "What do we know about their current military capabilities?" asked the Karathi military advisor, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled anxiety. High Counselor Malik's expression grew even grimmer. "Our intelligence suggests they have constructed over 200 warships in the past year. Their industrial output has increased by 3,000% since they began their isolation. Most concerning, they appear to have developed new weapons technologies that our sensors cannot properly analyze." The silence that followed was deafening. Every delegate in the chamber remembered the destruction of the Korathi enforcement fleet in the Kepler system. 17 minutes, 3 heavy cruisers, and 12 escort vessels, reduced to floating debris by an enemy that had supposedly been technologically inferior. "Perhaps," suggested the Vorthan delegate, hopefully, "we could send diplomatic envoys to negotiate a return to previous arrangements. Offer them improved trade terms, expanded territorial recognition, even council membership with full voting rights." High Counselor Malik's translator buzzed with what sounded like bitter laughter. "We have tried. Every diplomatic message goes unanswered. Every envoy ship is turned away at the border. The humans have appointed military attaches to handle all external communications, and those attaches speak only in ultimatums. The truth that none of them wanted to acknowledge directly was becoming impossible to ignore. Humanity had not simply withdrawn from galactic civilization. They had demonstrated that they had never needed the Council's approval for anything. Every restriction, every limitation, every patronizing lecture had been endured solely out of a desire for peaceful coexistence. That desire was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: complete indifference to alien opinion in the human territories. Life continued with frightening efficiency. Admiral Rodriguez now commanded fleets that patrolled space lanes the Council had never imagined could be controlled by a single species. The colonies that had once begged for basic resources now manufactured everything they needed and more. Human scientists had stopped sharing their research. Human artists had stopped creating works that celebrated galactic diversity. Human children were being taught that aliens were not friends to be trusted, but obstacles to be avoided. Most unsettling of all, humanity had stopped trying to make friends. The species that had once charmed first contact delegations with their curiosity and enthusiasm now regarded alien contact with the same cold politeness. They might show to potentially dangerous wild animals. As the emergency session continued through the night, a single thought echoed in every delegate's mind. They had created this situation through their own arrogance and cruelty. They had taken a species that asked only for respect and turned them into something that no longer cared about galactic opinion. Humanity's patience had been a gift to the galaxy, freely given for 30 years, but gifts, once broken through casual cruelty and systematic dismissal, could never be repaired or returned. The humans had learned to live without alien approval, and the galaxy was discovering just how much they had depended on human cooperation without ever acknowledging it. The age of human patience was over, and nothing would ever be the same.